Wait, come back. Stop the car! Please stop!
3 cold-hearted children abandoned their own parents like unwanted luggage. They left Helen and Samuel Carter on the side of a quiet desert highway outside Phoenix, Arizona, under the scorching afternoon sun. "You're becoming a burden we can't carry anymore," their oldest son said. Then the black luxury SUV drove away, leaving the elderly couple alone with 2 small bags and the clothes they were wearing. But those 3 ungrateful children had no idea what they had just thrown away. If stories about justice, family, and truth inspire you, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Helen Carter woke up that morning with a strange heaviness in her chest, not the kind caused by illness. After 72 years of life, she knew the difference between a body that was tired and a heart that had been quietly breaking. This was the second kind. It was the feeling that slowly creeps in when you realize the place you once called home no longer feels like yours. She stared quietly at the ceiling of the bedroom she had shared with her husband for nearly 50 years. Beside her, Samuel was still asleep. His breathing was slow, slightly uneven, the lingering effect of the heart condition he had developed 2 years earlier. Helen turned her head and studied his face. The deep wrinkles around his eyes, the silver hair that used to be dark, the lines across his forehead carved by decades of responsibility. Every line told a story. Stories of working double shifts, stories of building a home brick by brick, stories of raising 3 children who once ran through the hallways laughing. She reached out and gently brushed her fingers through his hair. "How did we get here?" she whispered softly. Samuel didn't wake. Helen slowly got out of bed. Every step carried the familiar stiffness of age. Her knees protested, her back ached, but she moved anyway. In the kitchen, she began doing what she had done almost every morning of her adult life. She cooked breakfast. Not because anyone asked, not because anyone appreciated it anymore, but because cooking was the only language of love she still knew how to speak. She cracked 3 eggs into the frying pan. 3 eggs for 4 people. She had already decided how it would work. Samuel would get 2. Her daughter Melissa would get 1. Helen herself would take only half. That was enough. She was standing at the stove when Melissa appeared in the doorway. Melissa was 40, a successful financial analyst with perfectly styled hair and a permanent expression of irritation. Her eyes moved immediately to the pan. "Mom, eggs again?" Helen kept her eyes on the stove. "I thought you'd want breakfast before work." Melissa sighed loudly and walked into the kitchen. "You know how expensive groceries are getting, right?" She dropped a stack of medical bills onto the table. "They came yesterday. Dad's medication again." Helen didn't need to look. She already knew. Samuel's heart medication cost nearly $300 a month. Melissa crossed her arms. "Every month it's something. Food, electricity, prescriptions. It's getting ridiculous." Helen quietly placed the eggs on a plate. "Sit down," she said softly. "Eat while it's warm." Melissa hesitated, then pulled out a chair and started eating. Not a single thank you. Her eyes were already back on her phone. Helen prepared Samuel's plate and carried it to the bedroom. He was awake now, sitting on the edge of the bed, reaching for his pills. "What did she say this time?" he asked. "Nothing important," Helen replied gently. Samuel studied her face. After 50 years of marriage, he could read her better than any book, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and started eating. Down the hallway, the house slowly came to life. Their second son, Daniel, was already in the living room watching television. Their youngest, Kyle, had just arrived, even though he had his own apartment across town. That alone told Helen something was wrong, something was coming. She could feel it in the air, the same way you can sense rain before the first drop falls. Half an hour later, Daniel walked into the bedroom. He didn't knock. That was another thing that had disappeared over the years, small courtesies. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," Daniel said. "All of us, living room." Samuel set down his fork. "I'm eating." "It won't take long." Helen placed her hand gently on Samuel's arm. "Let's just go," she whispered. He sighed and grabbed his walking cane. The living room felt strangely formal when everyone gathered. Melissa sat with a folder of paperwork. Daniel stood near the window. Kyle leaned against the wall. Helen and Samuel sat together on the smaller couch. Daniel cleared his throat. "We've been discussing something." Samuel frowned. "Discussing when?" Melissa opened her folder. "We didn't want to worry you until we had a solution." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "What kind of solution?" Melissa slid a paper across the table. "We found a place, a care facility." Samuel stared at the document. "A nursing home," he said quietly. Melissa corrected him. "It's a senior care residence." Samuel's voice dropped. "Say it plainly." The room went silent. Melissa exhaled. "It's the best option." Helen didn't cry. She simply looked at her 3 children, really looked at them, trying to find the little boys and little girls she once held in her arms, but all she saw now were strangers. Samuel slowly leaned back on the couch. "And when did you decide this?" Melissa answered calmly. "They can take you by the end of the week." Samuel looked at Helen. The decision had already been made. This wasn't a conversation, it was a notification. Helen nodded once. "All right," she said quietly. Friday arrived faster than either Helen or Samuel expected. The house moved quietly that morning, almost politely, as if everyone was pretending this was just another ordinary day. Helen folded their clothes into 2 small bags. Not much. A few shirts, Samuel's medication, their old wedding photo, and a small Bible that had belonged to Helen's mother. Melissa stood in the doorway watching the packing. She didn't say anything, but her eyes followed every item that went into the bag, counting, making sure nothing extra was taken. At exactly 9 a.m., a white transport van pulled into the driveway. 2 workers in blue uniforms stepped out. They were kind, too kind. The kind of kindness people learn when they have done this job many times before. Samuel picked up his bag himself, even though one of the workers offered to help. His pride would not allow anything else. Helen took one last look at the house, the green front door, the porch Samuel had built with his own hands, the lemon tree he planted in the backyard when the children were small. 35 years of memories stood quietly behind that door. She turned away. She didn't look back. The Sunrise Senior Residence sat nearly 40 minutes outside the city, a long cream-colored building surrounded by trimmed hedges and quiet gardens. Inside, everything was clean, too clean. The smell of disinfectant floated through the hallways. Their room had 2 narrow beds and a window overlooking the parking lot. Meals were at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. Visitors were allowed on weekends. Helen nodded politely while the nurse explained everything. Samuel sat on the bed, staring at the floor. That first night was the hardest. The building was never completely silent. Someone coughed down the hallway. A television played softly somewhere in the distance, and every few minutes someone cried. Not loudly, just the quiet crying of people who had slowly realized no one was coming back. Helen lay awake staring at the ceiling. Across the room, Samuel was doing the same. Neither of them spoke. Finally, she reached her hand across the space between their beds. Samuel reached back. Their fingers met in the darkness. "We'll get through this," she whispered. Samuel didn't answer. A week passed. No calls, no visits. Helen stopped looking at the hallway phone after the 5th day. Samuel grew quieter with each passing morning. One afternoon, he barely touched his lunch. Helen watched him carefully. She knew the signs. His heart condition was worsening, but it wasn't just his heart. Something inside him was fading. That night, he whispered something she didn't expect. "Helen, I want to leave." She turned toward him. "We don't have anywhere to go." "I don't care," he said softly. "I'd rather die outside in the open air than sit in this place waiting for people who already decided we're gone." Helen stared at the ceiling. Then she nodded. "Before sunrise," she said. They left the facility at 5:30 a.m. the next morning. 2 small bags, Samuel's walking cane, and the quiet determination of 2 people who had nothing left to lose. For the first hour, they walked slowly along the highway. Cars passed, hundreds of them. None stopped. The morning sun climbed higher. The heat began pressing down on the pavement. Samuel's breathing grew heavier. Finally, he stopped. "Helen, wait." She guided him to a low concrete barrier along the road. He sat heavily. His face had turned pale. Helen's stomach tightened. She handed him the last bottle of water. The highway roared beside them, cars rushing past at full speed. No one slowing, no one looking. Helen stepped to the edge of the road. She raised her arm. One car passed, then another, then another. None stopped. Samuel watched from the barrier. "Helen, it's okay," he said weakly, but she didn't lower her arm. She closed her eyes and whispered a simple prayer. "Please, just send someone." A moment later, an old dusty pickup truck slowed. Its hazard lights blinked. The truck pulled onto the shoulder. The driver stepped out, a man in his early 30s wearing work boots and a faded blue shirt. His name was Miguel Ramirez. He walked straight towards them. "What happened?" he asked. "My husband, his heart," Helen said. Miguel didn't hesitate. "Okay," he said calmly, "let's get him in the truck." Within minutes, Samuel was sitting in the back seat with the air conditioning blowing cool air across his face. Miguel drove him directly to the nearest hospital. Samuel was taken inside immediately. Helen waited in the hallway for 3 long hours. Miguel sat beside her the entire time. Finally, the doctor came out. "It was a mild cardiac event," he explained. "He'll recover, but he needs rest." Helen exhaled slowly. Then the doctor asked a question. "Is there family we should contact?" Helen paused. "No," she said quietly, "there isn't." Miguel heard everything, and something in his eyes changed. Later that evening, when Samuel was resting, Miguel told Helen their whole story. The house, the nursing home, the abandonment. Miguel listened without interrupting. Finally, he said something unexpected. "I have a small house my wife and I have," he said. "There's an empty room." Helen blinked in surprise. "You don't even know us." Miguel shrugged. "My grandmother died alone in a hospital once," he said softly. "I'm not letting that happen to someone else." 2 months later, a lawyer arrived at Miguel's house looking for Samuel Carter. What he revealed shocked everyone. Samuel's grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving behind $18 million and 12 rental properties. The law firm had sent letters for years, but Samuel never responded, because someone at his old address had been intercepting the mail. Helen immediately understood. Their children had known. They had hidden the inheritance, and they had sent their parents away anyway. 3 weeks later, a black luxury SUV stopped in front of Miguel's house. All 3 children stepped out, but this time Helen and Samuel were ready, because the parents they abandoned were now the ones holding all the power. And what Samuel decided to do next changed their lives forever. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the people the world throws away turn out to be the ones holding the greatest blessings.